Good morning, everyone. Like Steve said, today I'm going to be talking about the limitations of the language used to describe mediumistic phenomena. And so to demonstrate the importance and the power of language, I'm going to use an example from one of my favorite art forms, newspaper comic strips. So in this comic strip, this child is saying, "Words are weird. With arbitrary grunts and moans, I can implant an idea directly in someone's brain." And to a passerby, he says, "Giraffe pimp." And the passerby thinks of a giraffe dressed like a pimp, and the child says, "I refuse to use this power wisely." So I'll get to my actual topic now. Even though hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of people are receiving readings from psychic mediums every day, and even though dozens of mediums have written books and several even have their own TV shows, as a research community, we really don't know a whole lot about modern American mental mediums. So there, we're already running into language issues. What's a medium and what's a mental medium? Hold your horses and I will tell you. So we define a medium at the Windbridge Research Center as an individual who experiences regular communication with the deceased, and this is in contrast to a psychic, which is an individual who experiences information about or from living people, distant locations or events, and or times in the future or in the past that they did not originally experience. And it's often said that all mediums are psychic, but not all psychics are mediums. And though anyone can have mediumistic or psychic experiences, only people who have these experiences regularly and reliably are accurately termed mediums and psychics. So there's two kinds of mediums, physical and mental, and the states of consciousness that exist in each are arrayed along a continuum of waking state to trance states of various depth and levels of dissociation. So in the literature previously, the term trance medium was used, but because of this continuum of different trance states, it's not really an accurate term, since any given medium can be in full trance one day and basically a waking state the next day. So we'll go on to the two types, physical and mental. So in physical mediumship, it consists of phenomena including independent voices, paranormal lights, apports, which are objects that mysteriously appear, the levitation or movement of objects, ectoplasm, and raps on walls or tables. The purpose of mental mediumship is to convey messages from deceased animals or people, called discarnates, to living people, called sitters, during a specific event called a reading. So previously in the literature, terms have been used. Clairvoyant mediumship is a term that's been used, but this also is a term that isn't necessarily accurate. Clairvoyant means clear seeing, but the process of mediumship is actually multimodal. It consists of all of the senses. So this is an example quote of a medium describing those experiences. So she said, I get a sense in my body of how they passed. I will hear names and dates, see numbers and letters and places. Sometimes I get smells or odors, and I'm able to taste foods with special connection to the discarnate or the sitter. There's that where the bullet is. It fell to the next slide. So clairvoyant, it would just be clear seeing, which is limited to just seeing, but clearly from this quote you can see that they're clairaudient and clairgustant and clairsentient. So again, it's a term that's been used in the literature that's probably not accurate. It doesn't accurately reflect how mediumship actually works in the real world. Modern American mental mediums perform readings in person, often, not often, but sometimes in groups, over the phone and over the internet. And during these readings, they provide both mediumistic messages from the deceased and psychic information about the living reading recipient. My previous research demonstrated, we won't go through all this, but in this case, 20 mediums during 58 quintuple blinded readings, the mediums were able to report accurate and specific information about the deceased under blinded conditions with no prior knowledge, no feedback during or after the reading, and without using fraud or deception. And so these are significant p-values and no pun intended, medium effect sizes. So, but where are the mediums getting their information? So there's two competing psi-based theories of where a medium is getting this accurate information she's reporting. The first is called survival psi, and it suggests that she's communicating telepathically with the deceased. And the other is called somatic psi, and it states that mediums are using clairvoyance, precognition, and/or telepathy with the living to acquire information about the deceased. So no actual dead people, just information about them. Somatic psi has also been referred to as living-agent-psi, but this terminology is problematic. We don't like it. The word living is imprecise and cryptic because both the medium and the alleged people she's reading during this theory are both living. So what is the living referring to? Because in any case, the medium is living. And then, but as we just learned from that quote, mediumship is perception. And the word agent implies agency, that the medium has some sort of power over what's happening. But that's like, I smell a banana. Like, that means the banana has power? No, like it's misleading, the agency, that the medium has agency, because she's experiencing it as perception, and the what is being perceived is she doesn't have agency. You get it. We like the term somatic psi, which we coined in 2009. However, whatever you want to call it, there's no empirical evidence that any medium ever was doing that. Survival psi, on the other hand, has the evidence of self-reports of mediums. They know what psychic readings feel like, they know what communication with the deceased feels like, and they feel different. So these are self-reports, and self-report is important. It's the only way we can collect some data about internal experience. William James said, introspective observation is what we have to rely on first and foremost and always. So there are things we can only study with reports, self-reports: pain, quality of life, sensory perceptions, the aforementioned banana, bodily sensations. So in the medium's experience, they switch between reporting psychic information about the living and messages from the deceased. And not like moment to moment, but they'll do a part of a reading for the deceased and part of a reading for the living. Previous qualitative research has demonstrated that their experiences during those two are distinct and distinguishable. So these are some quotes from mediums discussing those differences. So they talked about sensory perceptions. There's a heaviness around the sensation of living people, like air compared to helium. The auditory aspect is much sharper. When I'm perceiving someone who is deceased, their energy is more like helium. With psychic information, I have to squint from the inside out, like to focus on something in the distance. When I do mediumship, it's not squinting at all, it's just receiving. They also talked about physical sensation. So one said, physically, mediumship charges me up. It's like having 8 cups of cappuccino. It's like a buzzing. I've learned I can't do readings too late at night because I'll just be up all night. It's like a supercharge. Psychic information doesn't do that. Another medium said, the physical feeling I get is a tingling or a pressure in my head when the medium stuff starts to happen, or when they're, meaning the deceased, are entering the room. I don't get that at all during a psychic reading. And these quotes are from Windbridge Certified Research Mediums. We have a team that we work with of about 20 mediums. We had 20 when we started, but 2 have since retired from research. These mediums have successfully completed 8-step peer-reviewed screening, testing, training procedure. And this is based on the premise that, if we study a small number, they're probably representative of the larger group of American mediums. But our recent research, we've brought in to look at a much greater number of mediums. So the research I'll be talking about today is from that larger group. So a few months ago, we published this paper, Quantitative and Qualitative Analyses of Mediumistic and Psychic Experiences. It's 40 pages long, so we'd be here till tomorrow if I went through every single bit. But it's available, it's from the journal Threshold, and it's available for free through our website at windbridge.org. So this study that this data is from was an online survey of mediums and non-mediums all over the US. And this particular piece that I'll be talking about is from 127 mediums who were over 90% female, over 90% white, and about 54 years old as the average age. One of the questions in the survey was, can you tell the difference between communication from the deceased and psychic information about the living? And about 97% said, yes, I can. 3 said, I don't know, and 1 said, no, I can't. So then the people who said yes, we then asked, in your own words, describe your experiences when receiving communication from the deceased, and in your own words, describe your experiences when getting psychic information about the living. And those questions were counterbalanced. And the responses were from 14 Windbridge mediums and 108 self-identified mediums. So we took those 244 text descriptions and quantitatively and qualitatively analyzed them. So for quantitative analysis, excuse me, we used Linguistic inquiry and word count, pronounced LIWC, text analysis software, and LIWC counts the content of the quantity of words in different psychologically meaningful categories. And then for qualitative, we used content analysis, which is a research method for the subjective interpretation of the content of text through the systematic classification and coding and identifying common themes. So what we found was the LIWC findings, the quantitative findings. We found that the descriptions of mediumistic experiences contained a larger proportion of words describing social and perceptual processes than did descriptions of psychic experiences. So this implies that mediumship involves a more interpersonal connections, as well as seems to be a more complex or vivid experience than the reporting of psychic information about the living. We also found that the descriptions of psychic experiences from these 122 participants contained a larger proportion of words that describe the category insight, which is a cognitive process. So that implies that the psychic experience may be more analytical or metaphorically left-brained, and the mediumship process might be more intuitive or metaphorically right-brained. For the qualitative content analysis, we found many themes. I just want to go through one specific one today. In the mediumistic experience, the experience was determined as the communication was triangulated. And this makes sense. The way we define mediumship is that they experience communication from the deceased and then report the messages to the sitter. But in that hearing of the messages from the medium, the sitter now experiences an after-death communication with their deceased loved one. For the psychic experiences, the piece that I wanted to talk about was this, which was that they reported the information flowing from various sources, including self, angels, God, and non-specific deceased people during a psychic reading for the living. So having done this research full-time for 15 years, my natural response was, wait, what? Dead people and a psychic reading? So we knew that dead people reported information about the living during mediumship readings. It's one of the categories that we talk about. The deceased person will often include information identifying of themselves, information about the sitter's life since they've died. So it's me, and I'm still here. I still saw you get married. I still saw you paint the kitchen, those sort of things. So we knew that part, but dead people giving information about the living during psychic readings, like that was new. And so I didn't know. I didn't want to make any guesses or claims. So I asked the mediums on our team. So I sent them the Threshold article, and I asked them in an email, have you ever experienced information about the living person getting a psychic reading as coming from deceased people? And some said, yes, unless I'm doing a medium reading, I assume all information comes from my guides. And since I believe guides are people who've lived on Earth, they're deceased people. Another said, accessing higher streams of consciousness brings information not just from the person's own energy, but other energies as well. But some said, no, the way I work with spirit is to create a boundary between mediumistic and psychic. And if I didn't control it, then yeah, but I know how to control it, so that doesn't happen anymore. This I wanted to bring up. Mediums often use words like energy, vibration, or level, and these are words that come from fields like physics, but there aren't words in English that describe exactly what a medium is experiencing, so they sort of have to steal these words from other fields. One medium said, if some mediums are reporting that they're receiving information from random spirits, maybe they're not fully developed. Well, thank you, research medium. That's a hypothesis I can test. And so in our survey, we had also asked the people, how long have you been performing mediumship readings for other people? And all the Windbridge mediums, over 10 years, but only 30% of the self-identified mediums. So maybe that's why I hadn't heard this before, was that the mediums I work with are all have a lot of experience, and they may have learned how to block it. So this indicates that blocking communication from the deceased during a psychic reading may be a learned skill. And this also may be why some people in this group were saying no, and I don't know how to tell the difference between those. Maybe it's something that you learn along the way. So this finding of discarnates as a source of psychic information calls into question theoretical frameworks that posit separating mediums' experiences into categories that do and do not involve communication with the deceased, and the continued use of terminology reflecting such a separation. So again, we know the way that we've defined is that the deceased provide messages for sitters during mediumship readings and information about those sitters' lives during mediumship readings. And this new data demonstrates that the deceased can provide information about psychic reading recipients during psychic readings, but also the deceased during mediumship readings can provide information about other deceased people. So someone might say, like, oh, I'm with your grandmother, I have the white dog with me. So they provide information about other deceased people, and even about the future. So one of the mediums on our team sent this to me not too long ago. And she said, I did a gallery reading, a group reading, in a situation like this, January 27th, and the sitter's mom, so the medium was reading a female sitter, and the sitter's mom was talking to her, her deceased mom. And the sitter's mom said that her grandson, the sitter's son, was a football fan, told me he liked the Eagles, and said he'd be very happy very soon, so basically announced to all 600 attendees that the Eagles were going to win the Super Bowl. So don't box in what the deceased can do. They're capable of a lot. They lead rich lives, or deaths, or afterlives, I guess. So we can't disprove that mediums are communicating with the deceased, and we can't disprove that communication with the deceased is part of every type of psi experience. So it would be irresponsible to posit a general survival-based theory for all psi phenomena. Precognition, dead people. Telepathy, dead people. Clairvoyance, dead people. But that would be irresponsible because that's not the reports from the people who have those experiences. It would also be irresponsible to continue to use somatic psi-like explanations for mediumistic experiences when we have this data from 122 people saying, no, they're different. A clear line can't be drawn between purely psychic with the living and purely communication with the deceased experiences. Using terminology that implies we actually know what's going on or how it works is dangerous. I was going to do a little survey here, but we'll move on. Language should be respectful and reflect the preferences of the experiencers. So all the people in this study are self-identified as mediums. They identified with the term medium. And they may use trance medium, and they may use clairvoyant medium, but I can't use that as a researcher because it's not broadly generalizable to all people. So, and as a society, we're already used to doing this. We already know how to do this, how to respect people's preferences because of people's gender identity and sexual preference. We already know how to do this. So going forward, it'll be necessary for language to reflect empirical data and the experiences of modern mediums rather than philosophical conjecture. Living agent Psi is dead. Empirical research beats philosophy. There you go.
Hello? There we go. I'm going to exercise the tyranny of the timer.
Sure.
Your data is very interesting, but I have to tell you, I'm shocked, I tell you, that you would say there's no empirical evidence for somatic psi. I mean, Mrs. Piper, for example, would routinely give information about the living, about things that happened to the sitter shortly before the seance. Mrs. Leonard would give information in book tests about which the deceased...
And about what decade were these things happening?
I'm sorry?
About what decade were these things happening?
Well, it was a while ago, so...
Yeah, so I'm saying about modern mental American mediums. That's not their experience. So there's no evidence that that's what's happening the way mediumship works now. That is a wonderful argument. Well.
My other concern has to do with a dialectical strategy that you're adopting that I'm a little concerned about. And that is, it seems that you're trying, in order to explain the data as you find it, a simple survival hypothesis explains nothing. The mere statement that consciousness can survive bodily death will not explain the nature and the character of the data as we find it. To do that, you need to bulk up the survival hypothesis with a number of auxiliary assumptions about the nature and the character of the afterlife, about whether people would want to communicate, whether they're able to communicate, how easy it is to communicate, and compare that to a somatic psi hypothesis that's equally bulked up by assumptions. So you need to compare two robust hypotheses to one another and actually just compare their assumptions and see which are most supported. And it seems to me you're comparing a bulked up survival hypothesis to a simple somatic psi hypothesis.
Well, that seems like the way that a philosopher would attack this problem. As an empiricist, I'm just going to ask a bunch of people what's happening, and that our mission at the Windbridge Research Center is to alleviate suffering, which I'm currently doing, apparently. And these people, it's very important to me. These people are having these experiences, and it's very clear that somatic psi, that reading for psychic and getting psychic information feels different than communication from the deceased. So in order to respect their experiences, I have to follow what they're saying, not what we can conjecture philosophically about whatever you just said. Okay. Yeah, over dinner. I gotcha.
Two-part question. First, of the number of people who tried for Windbridge certification, how many succeeded?
About 75% succeeded. And we're quick to point out that a mediumship reading involves at least 3 people, and the medium is only 1. So the sitter may be a bad sitter. The deceased person might not have learned how to do it yet. So this is the reason this was through a grant of our gathering of our team, and we don't do it anymore because we don't find it ethically sound to test someone and then say you didn't pass when it might not be their responsibility. It could be a deceased or sitter issue.
I was concerned about the notion of what proportion of mediums out there in the world could plausibly be believed to be as effective as Windbridge mediums, given we're only a few blocks away from where Penn Jillette is regularly shooting his mouth off about how all mediums are charlatans and con men who parasitize grieving people in order to steal their money. And I'd like to get your, we don't have him here to throw pies at, so I'd like to get your response to that attitude.
Well, the accuracy data that I presented is from 20 mediums doing 58 readings under quintuple blind conditions. Their readings are over the phone. I'm acting as the proxy sitter. I don't have any information. All we have is the first name of the deceased person. I ask specific questions. What did the person look like? How did they die? What were their hobbies? What messages do they have for the sitter? And I could say, like, I defy you to do it, but if he did it and he got it, that just means he's a medium. So we've collected the data. It demonstrates they're not doing fraud. We've done EEG data that demonstrates it's not imagination or recollection. So yeah, I mean, if he changes his mind, he doesn't get a TV show. I can report negative data. I can keep my job. Who are you going to trust? Thank you again.